What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We just got done with Halloween. Had a whole spooky month of October to watch some great horror movies. Today I'd like to go over some of the best and worst I saw of the month. And just a general disclaimer, this isn't necessarily in any order, this isn't a ranking. These are just some movies that I really enjoyed, some movies I didn't enjoy as much. But before we begin, huge thanks to today's sponsor, Chumbly. More about them later. And as always, thank you for watching. Before we get into the big list, I'd like to go over some honorable mentions. First and foremost, we have Cube, a great turn of the millennium horror, kind of almost a proto-Saw. There's some Saw-like traps in there, some fun gore, some philosophical questions. But above all, it's just a great time. Check it out. Same with The Void, a throwback to 80s horror, especially Carpenter, Cronenberg, that sort of thing. There's some kind of a death cult in there, maybe some Lovecraftian monsters. It's a fun time as well, if a bit hollow. And then we also have Final Prayer, released as The Borderlands in the UK. I think the American title is much better. A fun found footage horror film that takes a little while to get going, but it is a good time once things start rolling. And now on to the bad. So my least favorite movies this time around, I had to pick three that really just sat with me the wrong way. Last night was Halloween. Every Halloween I try to watch a different Halloween movie. And yesterday I watched Halloween 5. It was bad. Just like really bad. Moving on. We had the M. Night Shyamalan influenced touch kind of by him, Devil, about a bunch of people in an elevator, and one of them's probably the devil. And you got like security guys trying to figure out what's going on. Some police get involved. It's a pretty bottled story. It doesn't really go beyond the scope of a building, maybe at one city block. It is kind of interesting, but overall, not the best one I saw. I mean, there were some pretty good contenders. It was hard to find some bottom tier movies this time around. And then, of course, we have Maxine, the third in the trilogy by Ty West following X and Pearl. Did not live up to those. There's a lot I would have to get into about what I didn't like about the movie, the way it kind of, the story was all over the place, things like that. Character motivations didn't make any sense. Kind of shifting focus on different characters that didn't really need to be there. There's a lot I didn't like about it, but we'll just leave it at that for now. Alright, so on to the good. And again, this isn't necessarily in any order. These are just a bunch of movies that I enjoyed this Halloween season. First up, we have Beetlejuice. Now this is a classic. You know, Tim Burton, Michael Keaton as the titular character Beetlejuice. Surprisingly, not as prominent in the film as the title would have you believe. The story does focus a lot more on the characters of the Dietzes that move into the house, and then a very young and charming Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis as a couple that dies early on in the film. It's not a spoiler. It's literally like the first 20 minutes of the movie, and has to deal with this new family moving in. If you haven't seen it, definitely give it a watch, especially around Halloween season. Fun for the whole family. If a little spooky, maybe a little too spooky for the little ones, but if nothing else, it'd be a nice introduction to some very great creature effects. Next up, we have Wreck, a found footage horror film filmed in Barcelona, I believe. Spanish language, it is subtitled. So if the jarring, shaky camera effects don't get you, having to read will. But it is a fun one. I won't talk about it too much because once you enter into the threshold of what the movie is actually about, it gets super exciting. I'd hate to spoil that if you don't already know what it's about. It did get remade, I believe, into a English language film with a similar premise, found footage. Don't watch that one. Watch Wreck. I think it's 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. Then we have From Beyond, a Stuart Gordon film from the 80s featuring some spectacular practical effects. It's got some really outlandish ideas, but it's a fun time. If you enjoy things like, early Cronenberg, like 70s, 80s, if you enjoy some Italian horror like Fulci, you got some of those influences scattered in there. Good time. Pretty gory, but I think it's tastefully done. Then you have another classic, Gremlins. I've seen this one before. In fact, as a kid, I remember wanting a little gizmo. It hits a little differently as an adult. I do think this is a family movie. A lot of people kind of complained when it came out. It was too scary for children, not really appropriate for families. But I tend to disagree. I think this one's actually a great way to introduce kids to sort of a comedy horror vibe. It's actually a Christmas movie, so there's still time to watch it. You can watch it anytime before Christmas to get you in the spirit. Next up, we have I Am Legend, another classic from my childhood. This is a great film with a lot of emotional depth, a lot of character development, has a slow, deliberate pace, great world building. Of course, you got Will Smith in arguably his prime. Now we're getting into some really cool ones. The Devil's Candy is a newer film, very small budget, very metal. It's probably the most metal horror film I've seen in a while. I won't get into too much what the actual story is. It's kind of, it's better if you just go in expecting you're gonna have a good time. It is pretty intense for some scenes, but if you're already trying to watch some horror movies, then you're gonna be fine with it, I'm sure. Speaking of intense, next up we have Terrifier 2. Now last year, or maybe it was the year before, I had seen All Hallows Eve and Terrifier 1, so I kind of had an idea of who this character of Art the Clown is. And Terrifier 2 really cemented him as this demented, just horrible figure from Nightmares. He can really stand toe to toe with the likes of Michael Myers or Jason. I've seen him blow up. This character is everywhere. I've seen him on mugs and T-shirts and posters. I haven't seen Terrifier 3 yet, but in 2 they really take the story and expand it in a great way, especially from 1. 1 was a little more hollow. There was maybe one big set, just the garage where most of it takes place, and the characters were a little more throwaway. But in this one, they really take the time to set up the characters. It's a long one. It's a long movie. I think the longest slasher I've ever seen. But it's worth it. If you're ready to sit down and just take this journey and have a few gory moments, then you'll have a good time. Now, this one surprised me a lot. It Stains the Sands Red. Kind of a mouthful. And the only thing I knew about this one going in is it's about a woman in the Las Vegas desert during a zombie apocalypse, fleeing from one lone zombie who's pursuing her. And that's all I really knew, and that's all I really need to know about it. The less you know, the better. It's surprising. I thought, oh, a zombie movie from the late 2010s. Can't be that great. Very surprising. Huge amount of emotional depth. Next up is I Am Not a Serial Killer. This one also surprised me. You think one thing when kind of reading about it, reading the title, seeing the poster, seems like it's gonna go one way. Found I liked the main character a lot more than I thought I would. Christopher Lloyd is in it. If you're, Back to the Future fan, it's pretty cool seeing him do something different. Just a wild, kind of psychoanalytical journey through the eyes of this teenager who thinks he may have some questionable tendencies that he wants to keep bottled up, and what it means for this neighborhood that he lives in. And last but not least, we have They Look Like People. Now, I had seen this one pretty early on in the month. This was one of my kind of dipping my toes into October movies, and I wasn't expecting a lot from it. I just, the poster caught my attention. I mean, look, it's something else. And this one, the best thing I can say about it is it's just a masterclass in tension and unease. There will be moments where I've felt exactly like this. You're kind of back and forth. Is this real? Is this in his head? What's going on? Great movie. Don't look too much into it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Well, anyway, that about does it. Hopefully, you found something to add to your list for next year if you want to dive into some spooky movies in October. These were the ones I enjoyed the most, with maybe a few to avoid, some I wasn't so crazy about, and some honorable mentions just in case. On my letterbox, I do have, all the movies that I've seen in October with some ratings and a few words about them if you really want to know my full thoughts on the movies. All right, well, that's it for this year's Spooktober. I'm Bruiser Brad, and thank you for watching, and until next time.